In this video, we're going to take a look at a purple ink by Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham. As always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the purple ink playlist, so if you'd like to see more of them, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. There's no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade quite a bit. Look all the way through. You're going to see it going lighter to darker, lighter to darker, lighter to darker, very constantly, all the way through the name of the ink. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub. I think the pen was having some flow issue at that moment, but it has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some very nice shading throughout all of this writing. 5 seconds to dry. It looks like I primed it. The medium was darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, still some very nice shading that we're getting throughout this writing, and you can understand why so many people like this ink. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some good color variation, and we're definitely getting it in the writing, and the smear test, you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Kaweco 475, a vintage pen with a flex nib, was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It is showing spots of shading throughout this writing, which is pretty nice. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is some shading. It's a little harder to spot, but it's definitely there. Brown starts darker, gets lighter. Quick goes dark to light to dark. 9 seconds to dry. Medium's the darkest tone on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, and there is shading, much harder to spot than even in the extra fine. Brown goes from a dark tone to a darker mid-tone to a dark tone again. The K in quick is very dark compared to everything around it. Lazy goes darker into a little bit lighter at the top of the Z, and then dark out of the Z with the Y. 20 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both don't show a ton of color variation, although we are getting it in the writing. And the smear test, I don't think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this very neat magenta tone down here, and as it moves up you see this nice blue that comes in, and when they mix, this is where we're getting this really cool purple, but the magenta is moving itself through the blue and moving on top. It really does make me feel like there's two different magentas here, and the reason for that is if it was moving with and behind that blue, we would see that showing up more purple as the blue than the blue itself. Now the one on the right that's let dry for 10 minutes, we see that a lot of that blue, a lot of that magenta has really stayed in place. And then we've got this very light magenta tone that's pushing its way up. It does suggest that this can be a very permanent ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, but it does offer spots of shading throughout it. Not too bad, just not my preferred look of it. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub. No feather spread, halo sheen, some nice spots of shading. You see it goes darker, lighter, darker, darker, lighter. It's pretty nice here. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the darkest tone on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading here, 11 seconds to dry. Scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, which we get. The medium shows none, and we got none. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself very well. You can feel safe using it in a note-taking situation. Where water does nothing to move this ink, it's really not budging. Pen Flush is just barely moving some of the darkest tones, but really not getting rid of the ink. And the 1/3 bleach solution is getting rid of all the magentas, but the blue is still there. Now, this ink was in a vintage pen, which might make you kind of nervous, but it only took water to get this out of that vintage pen, and it came out with no problems whatsoever. The next writing sample is done on monokaki paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread halo sheen. It does offer some shading throughout this writing. The extra fine is about the same tone, maybe just a tad darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, nice peppering of shading throughout all of this writing with 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, great peppering of shading all throughout. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation more in the extra fine. It shows itself better in the extra fine. The smear test says you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, and the realm of normal was 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham has a viscosity of 1.94, making this a little bit wetter than normal. If you're interested in how the viscosity and all that stuff's done, then down in the description is a link to that video. Now, let's take a look at Apica CD notebooks. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some very nice shading throughout this writing. The extra fine is just a little bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very nice shading throughout this writing, still peppering of color all over the place from lighter to dark, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, nice peppering of shading. Though most of it is darker, sometimes you get a very dark, like on the end of K or the E and the, and then sometimes it's a bit lighter, like the O in Fox, 11 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show good color variation, we're definitely getting it, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham has an average dry time of 10 seconds, meaning it dries a bit faster than normal. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. Looking at it, you can see a lot of spots that are coming through, obviously a lot of ghosting as a result of how deep it's getting into the paper. None of this came through and touched the paper underneath, but all of this means you can't use the back of the paper, you're going to lose everything. The medium, no feathers, very nice, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Very good performance there, really kind of surprising. The extra fine does have some feathering. You see it on the H in the B in brown, the F in fox, the H in the again. Lots of feathering. It's really tiny. It's all over the place. It's not the end of the world, though. It does spread to about a fine. It has no halo sheen. It has spots of shading that do come up, like the Q and the K in quicker or a bit darker. The A in lazy, a little bit darker, 1 second to dry. Scrubby shows some color variation, we're definitely getting it. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so good news. Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a nice brown ink from Monteverde, their Scotch brown. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham? I have to start by asking myself a very serious question. Do I like this because it took more effort for me to get it? It's a serious question. It is a really good purple, but not the best purple that I have used. I still really enjoy using it though, and I think the chase made it worth a little bit more to me. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? A very wet pen is going to put down a much darker, much more solid tone, and a very dry pen will be much lighter with a lot more shading coming through, but a medium flow pen will be just right. A great tone, enough shading to really make it kind of draw your attention in, especially from a fine nib. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Sailor's Chew Shoe.